This video is about mantra yoga, which is a form of contemplative practice that involves the use of words of power. So in one worldview, the entire universe is a form of vibration. There is a primordial oneness from which these different polarities arise, like hot and cold, light and dark, masculine and feminine, self and other, pleasure and pain, and so on. And the cosmic oneness creates the appearance of differentiation within itself by contracting a portion of its unlimited energy, and that energy vibrates between these different polarities. So that vibration is inherent within matter, because on a microcosmic level, atoms are energetically vibrating. They're not solid, actually. They're a form of energy. And that energy can also be expressed through, anything that exists, but including human language and different sounds. So that sound is this vibratory power that travels within a particular time and space and can impact the sense organs of a being who has the faculty of hearing. And it can also exist on a subtle level where there are mental sounds. There are vibrations that take place within the mind. So it's like we are hearing internally. There are several different languages throughout the world in which there is this concept that this primordial divinity expresses itself through language. This is true of Hebrew. It's true in Latin. It's also true in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a language that has been carefully refined and preserved over millennia by the priestly caste in India. So it is almost a dead language. There are very few people who speak it as a mother tongue, but it is also very potent and helpful for certain things. And different languages have different resonances and are therefore well suited to different purposes and aligning people's energy in a particular way. Sanskrit is a language that is especially effective for spiritual practice and aligning one's awareness with universal consciousness, because it has been systematized in a way where specific sounds and their energetic effect are taken into account, especially in mantras. So a mantra is a vehicle of mastering or transforming the mind. Manas and tara. So manas is mind and tara is an instrument or a means. Mantra. Mantras can be spoken in any language, and they can have a lot of different meanings and effects and purposes. Most Sanskrit mantras have some kind of meaning that is designed to have a particular impact on a person's awareness. Not only meaning, but also a particular resonance. So there is the literal vibration of a mantra, which is why the refined systematization of sounds that we find in Sanskrit is so potent for spiritual practices, because these particular sounds resonate in a way that has this uplifting, spiritually transformative effect on a person's awareness. One reason why mantras are especially effective tools for meditation is that they both serve to focus the mind on a relatively subtle object. So the subtlety helps to refine our awareness and discernment. And as we're focusing on this subtle object, there's also this continuous resonance and vibration that is soaking into our causal body, our subtle body, and our physical body. When we meditate and we focus on a particular object for extended periods of time, the mind begins to take on the qualities of whatever we meditate on. So if we are watching hours and hours of violent television every day, that can have a very degenerative effect on our awareness, because that seeps into the subconscious and then shapes our emotional state. Whereas if we focus on spiritually uplifting things for hours and hours a day, then that also seeps into the mind and transforms our awareness and helps us to feel more at one and at peace and connected to all things. So when we focus on a mantra, there are different levels of impact that the mantra can have on a person. These include the levels of resonance, so the literal sound of the particular mantra that you're using, speed, how fast you're repeating it, rhythm, the way that you're repeating it, meaning, so the meaning, the definitions of the words that and the intention that is being expressed through those words. And then also the emotion behind the repetition, so what you're feeling as you repeat it. All of these things impact the way that the mantra can influence a person. So there's not one correct way to use mantras, and there are a lot of different mantras that have different energies to them and have different effects. So some mantras can be very energizing and stimulating, or heating or cooling, or they can calm you down, or they can, invoke particular deities or archetypal forms and energies into yourself and into your life. Generally speaking, in regards to the emotional component of mantra, it is most beneficial for spiritual practice if we repeat a mantra with a sense of devotion and love and bowing or honoring the divine. Mantra is closely related to tejas, which we spoke about more in the section on Ayurveda, which is the subtle form of fire in the body and mind. So there's pitta, which is like the physical digestive fire, and then there's tejas, which is the mental fire. And mantras and language in general are one way that the mental fire gets expressed. So the ability to speak at all is in some ways connected to this inner fire. And then when we repeat mantras over and over again, the resonance influences and transforms the mental fire. So the mental fire begins to resonate with the energy of the mantra. The mantra and the subtle vibrations of the mantra can in fact act as a form of food or sustenance for the mental fire, in a similar way to how physical food can sustain the physical body. So mantra is not essential in the same way for survival as physical food, but it is also a form of nourishment that can help to awaken and clarify this mental fire. However, there can also be times in which this fire is not contained and becomes overstoked or too hot or what have you, and then that can deplete ojas, the subtle form of kapha, which is connected to sexual energy and to emotional stability. And that can also be very destabilizing. So there has to be a balance and a gradual buildup of mantric charge over time in a way that somebody can digest, because different people have different capacities at particular times in their life to digest mental sustenance. But with practice, if you take a little bit of sustenance at a time, then over time you can gradually increase the amount of mantra that you're doing on a daily basis, and that can begin to further expand your capacity to digest mental vibrations, mantric vibrations, and to awaken and expand your awareness. Another very important aspect of mantra yoga are the 4 levels of speech. So sound and speech and language in this philosophical framework get expressed in 4 different ways. The first way is Vaikhari, which is audible speech. It's vocal speech. I'm using Vaikhari as I speak right now. And it is the most objective form of speech. So it can be heard by multiple beings with, operating hearing faculties. So it is, tangible, and generally speaking, the language that human beings use to audibly speak involves symbolic representations of different concepts of reality. So it's ways that we conceptualize and break up, different aspects of human experience so that we can better understand and communicate about them. So while that is a very helpful and powerful tool, Vaikari is especially misleading sometimes because these labels, these conceptual categories that we overlay onto objective reality can become so ingrained in the psyche that they begin to distort our perception of reality, because reality is a unified whole. But then when we use this conceptual faculty to break things up into different elements, then we begin to understand reality as divided. And that can be misleading sometimes. The second level of speech is madhyama, which means middle speech. It refers to mental speech. So this is a intermediary level of speech between the totally objective Vaikari, which is audible and tangible, and more subtle internal forms of speech that I'll talk about in a moment. So madhyama is a form of speech that consists of thoughts and images and concepts and memories. So these different aspects of the mind are different ways that this mental speech gets expressed within a particular individual being. A particular Purusha has a particular set of self-identifications, so that only that being, excluding supernatural powers like telepathy, only that particular being can hear or access their own thoughts. So although thoughts can be made into an object by that being, they are intangible and relatively subjective in that other beings cannot generally have access to our thoughts directly. And they can only be communicated through the intermediary of Vaikari, which then tends to further distort the exact experience of the person who is trying to communicate. So on the madhyama level, there are all of these subtle impressions, these karmic impressions in the causal body that get projected into different thoughts and experiences and emotions and analyses and biases and things like that. And those patterns, as we've been discussing, can be helpful in certain situations, and they can also bind us and keep us locked into ignorance. If the thought patterns are unhealthy or distorted, then they can distort the way that we experience reality, and they can shape the way that we behave in really unhealthy ways. So when we are using mantra, we can also transform the way that we think by beginning to ingrain healthy thought patterns that have this purifying resonance to them. And over time, with practice, that healthy thought pattern will begin to override unhealthy thought patterns and help us to move in the direction of greater wholeness and serenity and compassion and wisdom. The third level of speech is called pashanti, which is literally a word that means seeing. And it refers to a synesthetic level of speech. That means that it's a level of speech where light and sound are basically fused. And this is also explained as a precognitive impulse. So usually people are not consciously aware of this pashanti level of speech occurring, but it is a form of speech that happens precognitively before mental speech arises. So there are these subtle impulses that are not fully formed into distinct phonemes or words yet, but which contain the seeds of mental speech and then also audible speech. On this level of speech, there are both samskaras, which are, as we've discussed, these deeply ingrained karmic patterns that are operating these subtle seeds that then project into conditioned thoughts and experiences. And there's also what is called pratibha, which is also sometimes referred to as intuition or insight. So pratibha is pratibha is a precognitive impulse that arises from Icha Shakti, which is divine will. So it is this universal willpower that can guide a particular person when they tap into this aspect of that exists within themselves and within all beings, and is innate within awareness. So Pashyanti is subjective, whereas Vaikhari is totally objective, and Madhyama is an intermediary level. Pashyanti exists on the level of the subject, of awareness, and the causal body. And through refining a mantra from the audible and mental levels into Pashyanti, we can begin to more directly access and transform the causal body and help to align our awareness with universal consciousness.